Microaggression.
Microaggressions.
Microaggressions.
A microaggression.
Microaggressions.
We've got good news coming out of Maricopa, Arizona. And the proof? Jovan Hutton Pulitzer is smiling.
And the serpent could fire, wielder the flame of honor.
Okay, let's get started here. I'm looking at an article. It's reposted by the Microsoft News Network from the Examiner. It says, let's just put this up on screen here. We have Arizona Senate narrows Maricopa County 2020 election audit to preferred team. So the right team is coming along. Arizona Senate Republicans say they're close to commencing their own audit of the 2020 election in Maricopa County nearly 3 weeks after getting a favorable ruling from a judge. The majority Republican state Senate released a readout Thursday afternoon saying that further details about the audit would be released soon. Quote, as thousands of our voters continue to call for a thorough audit of the 2020 election in Maricopa County, I am pleased to report we have narrowed it down to a preferred forensic audit team, said Senate President Karen Fann. And here's the tweet with the legal document here. This is for remedial release on the 2020 election from Karen Fann. This says, as thousands of our voters continue to call for a thorough audit of the 2020 election in Maricopa County, I'm pleased to report we have narrowed it down to a preferred forensic audit team. We are negotiating final details on the execution of the audit and hope to have an announcement soon. Our desire is to work closely with the County Board of Supervisors, and the Senate continues to believe the proper location of the audit is at the county to preserve the chain of custody and maintain security of the ballots and equipment. Our goal is to make this a bipartisan effort with full transparency and in joint cooperation with the Maricopa County officials. We've been reaching out to experts on election processes in Arizona and around the nation and hope to have the best and brightest involved in the audit. That means Jovan. This audit will be broad and detailed. The team will include, but is not limited to, testing the machines, scanning the ballots, performing a full hand count, and checking for any IT breaches. When all the work is done, there will be a full report for the Senate and county to review. Our voters expect this audit, and it can be a big step in returning trust and confidence in our election process. This is the best news so far. And so far, all the authority, this is from top down, that all of the ballots are going to get voted. So there's no hitch. They'd be giving you excuses by now. And this is what Jovan Hutton just said, Hutton Pulitzer. This is the first time in American history that we've gone back and had this level of forensics applied to an audit. All 2.1 million ballots in Maricopa are going to be counted. This is the first domino in the long chain, and this one has to fall before the others will. But what they find here could expose something that would open up audits in other counties in Arizona and in other states. All good news. We're going to switch it. We're going to tidy up the vote elections for 2022. Good job to Arizona, for all the people of Arizona, for fighting. This could save the republic. I'm Doug TenNapel in Exile.
Dr. Fauci, in a recent British study, David Wiley and others found that no symptomatic reinfections from COVID-19 after following 2,800 patients for several months. In fact, there have been no reports of significant numbers of reinfections after acquiring COVID-19 naturally. Shane Crotty, a virologist at La Jolla Institute for Immunology, concludes from his experiments that the amount of immune memory gained from natural infection would likely prevent the vast majority of people from getting hospitalized disease, severe disease for many years. In this study, which was published in Science, Dr. Crotty showed that antibody levels stayed relatively constant with only modest declines over 6 to 8 months. Dr. Crotty reported that, notably, memory B cells specific for the spike protein, or RBD, were detected in almost all COVID-19 cases with no apparent half-life at 5 to 8 months after infection. In other words, Dr. Crotty found significant evidence of long-term immunity after COVID infection. Furthermore, Dr. Crotty noted B-cell memory to some other infections has been observed for as long as 60-plus years after smallpox vaccination, or even 90 years after a natural infection with influenza. That was a woman who got the Spanish flu, still showed immunity 90 years later. So rather than being pessimistic towards people gaining immunity after they've had COVID or had a vaccine, studies argue for significant optimism. In fact, there have been no scientific studies arguing or proving that infection with COVID does not create immunity. There have been no studies showing significant numbers of reinfections. Of the 30 million Americans who have had COVID, only a handful of reinfections have been discovered. In fact, the New York Times reported last fall more than 38 million people at the time worldwide had been infected with the coronavirus, and as of that date, fewer than 5 of these cases had been confirmed by scientists to be reinfections. Scientists interviewed for the article concluded, in most cases, a second bout with the virus produced milder symptoms or none at all. Given that no scientific studies have shown significant numbers of reinfections of patients previously infected or previously vaccinated, what specific studies do you cite to argue that the public should be wearing masks well into 2022?
I'm not sure I understand the connection of what you're saying about masks and reinfection. We're talking about people who have never been infected before.
You're telling everybody to wear a mask, whether they've had an infection or a vaccine. What I'm saying is they have immunity, and everybody agrees they have immunity. What studies do you have that people that have had the vaccine or have had the infection are spreading the infection? If we're not spreading the infection, isn't it just theater?
No, it's
You had
not.
the vaccine and you're wearing 2 masks. Isn't that theater?
No, that's not. Here we go again with the theater. Let's get down to the facts. Okay, the studies that you quote from Crotty and Sete look at in vitro examination of memory immunity, which in their paper they specifically say this does not necessarily pertain to the actual protection. It's in vitro.
And what studies can you point to that show significant reinfection? There are no studies that show
Just
significant
let me finish the response to your question, if you please. The other thing is that when you talk about reinfection and you don't keep in the concept of variants, that's an entirely different ballgame. That's a good reason for a mask. In the South African study conducted by J&J, they found that people who were infected with wild type and were exposed to the variant in South Africa, the 351, it was as if they had never been infected before. They had no protection. So when you talk about reinfection, you've got to make sure you're talking about wild type. I agree with you that you very likely would have protection from wild type for at least 6 months if you're infected. But we in our country now have variants that are circulating.
Significant reinfection. What study shows significant reinfection, hospitalization, and death after either natural infection or the vaccine? It doesn't exist. There is no evidence that there are significant reinfections after vaccine. In fact, I don't think we have a hospitalization in the United States after the 2-week period after the second vaccination. We don't have a death in the United States.
You're not hearing what I'm saying about variants. We're talking about wild type versus variants.
And what proof is there that there are significant reinfections with hospitalizations and death from the variants? None in our country. Zero.
Well, because we don't have a prevalent of a variant yet. We're having one. Can I finish? We're having 117 that's becoming more dominant.
Policy based on conjecture.
No,
it
isn't based on conjecture.
Variants, so you want people to wear a mask for another couple years.
No.
You've been vaccinated and you parade around in 2 masks for show.
No.
You can't get it again. There's virtually 0% chance you're going to get it, and yet you're telling people that have had the vaccine, who have immunity. You're defying everything we know about immunity by telling people to wear a mask who've been vaccinated. No. Instead, you should be saying there is no science to say we're going to have a problem from the large number of people being vaccinated. You want to get rid of vaccine hesitancy? Tell them they can quit wearing their mask after they get the vaccine. Okay. You want people to get the vaccine? Give them a reward instead of telling them that the nanny state's going to be there for 3 more years and you got to wear a mask forever. People don't want to hear it. There's no science behind it.
Well, let me just state for the record that masks are not theater. Masks are protective. And we
You have
ask
immunity there, theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any science.
I totally disagree with you.
Microaggression.
Microaggressions.
Microaggressions.
A microaggression.
Microaggressions.
General Michael Flynn speaks in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he gave away the entire Trump plan. Here's what he has to say.
And the serpent could fly, wielder of the flame of honor.
Here's Michael Flynn over in Tulsa. This is a quote of him, what he said about Trump. I would introduce him at events as the most imperfect guy you're ever going to vote for President of the United States, Flynn said. If you want your political person to be perfect, then you're in the wrong country. And then here's another one from over at Tulsa World. Tulsa pastor challenges Lankford. Tulsa pastor challenges Lankford for Senate with boost from Trump loyalist Michael Flynn. Once again, this is already evidence of huge news media bias. This Tulsa World is a garbage paper run by Marxists, and you can tell because look at the headline. Tulsa pastor challenges Lankford. They made sure that they said the word Lankford so that his name goes up in Google recognition. They did not mention the pastor's name, Pastor Jackson Lemire. In the article, they just said Tulsa pastor. They don't want his name in the headline. They don't want to give him name recognition when it comes to the election. That's how this works. Spot the woke media slant in this article. This is Pastor Jackson Lemire, speaks in Jenks with an announcement of his run for the U.S. Senate seat. Those who have wondered why all of Oklahoma's congressional delegation, save one, went along with an unsubstantiated, fruitless, and ultimately dangerous denial of November's presidential election results got an answer on Tuesday. Flanked by a cadre of former presidential Donald Trump loyalists that included retired General Michael Flynn and local COVID contrarians, Pastor Jackson Lemire, formally announced that he is a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate seat now held by James Lankford in the 2022 Republican primary. I just want to point out that Michael Flynn is working with Trump on primarying people for 2022. Notice they're doing hard work on the ground for elections, not engaging in weirdo conspiracy theories. You can believe what you want, but there's a lot of work to do on the ground because the people in the know on the inside of the Trump administration are going for 2022. At the election box, we need your work. So make sure that you volunteer. Try to get in a position as an adjudicator to make sure that gets straightened out, if you know what I mean. I'm Doug TenNapel in Exile.
Yeah, on the COVID-19 vaccines, what does the president say to Americans who have ethical concerns about taking some of those vaccines, that it might violate their conscience?
Give me a little more information. Why would it violate their
The
conscience?
Johnson & Johnson one.
Well-
that one has ties to a connection to abortion-derived cell lines. So some people are worried that would violate their conscience, taking that. So the president would say what to that?
He would say, I know the Pope has spoken to the safety and efficacy of all three vaccines, and the American people, these vaccines have been validated by health and medical experts. They're trying to save people's lives, keep people safe, and return our country to normal.
Microaggression.
Microaggressions.
Microaggressions.
A microaggression.
Microaggressions.
If you're a pro-life cop, if you're a Christian cop, if you're against gay marriage cop, you're fired in California.
And the serpent could fly, wielder of the flame of honor.
This is what being nice got you. 30 years ago, everyone said, What does my marriage do to your marriage? And I believe everyone should be able to do whatever they want with their own body. Now, those people who embrace that, you don't get to work and you don't get to eat unless you embrace the state progressive secular religion. This is a state-sponsored, state-ordained, formal secular religion. Just because there's no God in it doesn't mean they don't have their sacred scriptures, their sacred sins, their sacred good works, their priests, their prophets, and their doomsday scenario. It has every form of a religion except the word God. And frankly, every person is just their own God on secular progressivism. It is whatever I say is the most authoritative word in the entire universe. Welcome to the Marxist communist states of America. One of the most blocked sites on Google, this is lifenews.com. California bill would remove police officers who are Christians or pro-life. A California bill that purports to remove police officers engaged in quote-unquote hate speech would allow the government to discriminate against peaceful pro-lifers, conservatives, and people of faith, stated pro-life leaders warned. The new California law enforces Accountability Reform Act, that's Assembly Bill 655. Call your assemblyman and tell them this thing is straight out of Babylon. Would root out police officers and potential hires for hate speech and their connections to hate groups by requiring law enforcement agencies to screen potential hires for hate. It would also allow officers who are found to engage in hate to be fired. This is why I laughed really hard when they said, how does my marriage affect your marriage? Your marriage affects my marriage because now I can't work if I don't affirm your marriage. If the words don't come out of my mouth and change the definition of marriage like yours, I don't get to eat. You still get to eat. I don't get to eat. This is how our state's unique form of neo-Marxism is coming to pass. And if you doubt that at all, find one single Marxist who is against same-sex marriage, who is against pro-choice, and you'll see every single one of them, but it's their doctrine. It is not optional. So why are you carrying their water? Why are you repeating their beliefs? If you guys have a comment on this, I'd love to hear from you down below, because some of our churches are going there too. I'm Doug TenNapel, in exile.